Everett and Doris Ackley were born 15 months apart. They were the second and third children of Carl Maxwell Ackley, a Scotch-Irish railwayman, and Nellie Ida Ackley Tepke, a first-generation German-American who was born in a South Dakota sod house. Due to the nature of their father's job, the ever-growing family, which produced 9 children during a span of 22 years, moved often between the Dakotas and Montana with little influence from their German grandparents. This pattern did not stop until Carl Ackley died of pneumonia in 1939 and Nellie moved her remaining minor children to Edmonds, Washington, where they stayed. So, what was Uncle Everett like before Pearl Harbor? What was he like before Pearl Harbor happened?
Well,
His personality.
he had been in the Navy, and he got out the November, a year before Pearl Harbor. And our dad had died, so he got out at the end of his enlistment, and he went to work at Bowling's. And after Pearl Harbor, he was still working at Bowling's, but he decided to take flight training, and he spent that time in Ellensburg, Washington, and got his pilot's license. And then I don't know how he got his commission. I don't remember, but I know that he went in as whatever the lowest rank is in the Navy. And he went to Pensacola, and he was taking flat top landings and takeoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And this one day, they were doing a duel, one side by side, and each of the pilots had a sailor in their hold. And somehow or other, their wings touched, and both planes went down. Both of the men were killed, but the other pilot didn't have a scratch. Everett lay in the swamp for about 4 hours before they found him. And of course he went to the hospital and had his arm set. But it wouldn't set right. It wouldn't heal. It just never healed. So he was transferred up to Sandpoint, Washington, the naval station, and was in the hospital there. They operated on his arm and found that a piece of the muscle had gotten in between the breaks and it wouldn't heal. They did surgery and it healed, but he had a huge scar, about a half-inch deep, and he had a 15% disability. Well, he was after his arm healed, he was still stationed at Sandpoint, and one day they tried to call him because there was a fire balloon over Green Lake. He didn't get the call, so they got another officer, a naval officer, to shoot the balloon down. At that time, the Japanese were sending fire balloons in hopes of catching like forest fires and that. But he didn't get it, and he spent the rest of his time in Sandpoint. That was the end of his Navy career.
Yeah.
Oh, I lost.
He retired. He kept up his commission, and he retired as lieutenant commander in the Navy.
What type of physical therapy did they give him for his arm?
Well, they exercised his arm because it had been in a sling and it bent so that it had to regain the strength. It never did regain full strength. And but he from there he went into he worked for a razor company repairing razors, and then he went into being a control tower operator, and that's what he retired from after 20 years. That's it.
He Grandma told me he did macrame to fix his hand.
No, he made all those tufted pillows. I have one someplace, I don't even know where it is.
What was he like as a brother when you guys were growing up? What was his personality like?
Well, he was one of my favorite brothers. Probably my favorite. He's just about 15 months older than I. And we did a lot of things together. Well, we didn't have any other playmates besides our family, our siblings. So he was a good brother.
And did the war change him?
Pardon?
Did the war change him? World War II? Did it change his personality at all?
I can't hear you.
Did World War II change his personality?
No, I don't think so. The one thing that did affect him, though, was while he was working in the tower, was he saw a friend of his coming in. The friend hadn't radioed ahead that he would be coming in, so he was like a loose cannon, and he collided with a landing plane. Both of the pilots were killed. But it wasn't like a Boeing, big Boeing plane. It was two smaller planes that collided.
What about the other guys in our what about the other men in our family? What did they do during the war?
Well, Leslie tried every way to get into service. He memorized the chart, but of course when they flashed a light in his eyes, they could see he had a glass eye. He was fooling around with the gun, and it took out his eye, and he had a glass eye. Phyllis was married to a miner, so he didn't. They worked at a mine in Montana. And Carol was in Washington, D.C., and she married a GI there. Arlene met and married a GI from Fort Lewis. He served in Europe, and he was wounded, so he got a Purple Heart. Arlene.
But wasn't Leslie?
Arlene married a GI. Jim, of course, he graduated from high school, and he went into the Air Force. And Merle graduated and went into the Army and was stationed in Alaska.
Didn't Leslie serve in a
But
Didn't Leslie serve in a munitions depot in California?
yeah, and he served also in New Jersey.
But
And then
He was in the Army though, wasn't he? Didn't he finally make it into the Army?
they finally inducted him into the Army, and he was in. First, he was an MP in Los Angeles. And they always said, you know, how horrible it was to lock those, put the Japanese in the concentration, in the camps. But you know, there was a gang of hoodlums in Los Angeles called the Zoot Suiters. And anything that looked Oriental, they would beat up on, even if it was a Chinese or a Filipino. What's next?
Did Everett go to combat at all?
Pardon?
Did Everett go to combat at all?
We're going to combat?
Yeah.
No.
No.
So, I don't know what to.
Is there anything else about Everett that you can remember from the war years?
No, not really. Because I was married by then, but I used to send care packages to him, and I'd get letters back from the guys that he shared them with, and they're always glad to get home-baked stuff. But I was married by then. My husband was in the Army. He went in April of 1941. He was stationed in Wyoming, and then went up to Fort Lewis. And we spent a summer down in Oklahoma. He was going to school. And then we were stationed again in Fort Lewis, and then they went from Fort Lewis to Camp Hogg, California, and then to Norman, Oklahoma, then to New York City, and then overseas.
Do you have any of the letters from your brothers still?
Pardon?
Do you have any of the letters from your brothers still?
I don't know what happened to them. I've often wished I'd saved the letters I gotten from overseas. He couldn't say an awful lot of them. He had to go through them himself and cut out the things that he couldn't send. But it was rather. I'm glad I don't have to go through it again.
Okay. Well, we're done with the questions. We're done.